Rest Stop with Brad Restituto.
7 years. Handoff, Damian Williams trying to get to the edge, breaks a tackle, 35, 30, Damian Williams, 20, stays in bounds, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Kansas City!
And the snap goes high over the head of Big Ben, all the way back to the 2, to the 1, and the Browns have it in the end zone, and they dive on the ball and recover it for a touchdown! Carl Joseph's got it in the end zone, a touchdown!
Derek looks left, Derek gonna throw for the end zone, caught! It is caught! Touchdown!
Welcome to the Rest Stop. It's February 16th, 2021. I'm Brad Restituto, your host. Spencer the Wiz joining me as always. Got a good show for you tonight as we wrapped up Valentine's Day weekend and President's Day yesterday. Heavy NBA show tonight as we're kicking in the middle of the season of NBA. The story so far, and right now, the Utah Jazz, as they won again last night in impressive fashion and are playing the best basketball right now. The Lakers, injury to Anthony Davis, what does that mean to their future? And we'll sprinkle in a little NFL news as well. So thanks for joining us. We're with you every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time on twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. You can also follow us live on my Twitter channel at Brad the Believer and on my Facebook page, Brad Restituto. Spencer the Wiz, you can follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. Spence, let's jump right into it. We'll have a guest tonight as well. Tyler Brown, former assistant basketball coach at University of Monterey Bay, Cal State Fullerton. We'll talk NBA basketball and get his opinion on everything going on in the NBA right now as well. Some games going on tonight and a few still in action, and we'll get to the scores right now. The primetime games, there was 2 of them on TNT. The Grizzlies, Spence, your Grizzlies, they were the first game on TNT tonight. They were leading early, and then the Pelicans looked like they kind of pulled away late. They ended up winning 144-113. Zion was an animal, Spence. He went to the rack at will, scoring 31 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Spence, let's talk about that real quick. The game was close at the beginning, but what do you see from the Pelicans tonight as they kind of rolled away and won comfortably towards the end?
Yeah, the Grizzlies just have a awful matchup with the Pelicans in the past 3 years. It's never a game that I look forward to at any point in time, and they just got crushed. They're not playing well right now, and the longer Jaren Jackson and everybody else is out, the worse it's going to be for Memphis. That's kind of my mainstay. They played very well up to this point, way better than they should have. They should be one of the worst teams in the league, but of course, Taylor Jenkins has them playing competitive. I think they're the top 3 and the least amount of turnovers per game. They're ramping that up to a whole new level right now. I'm not really sure where that comes from. John Morant was out for a while, so I guess you can say that reintroducing him to the offense has caused some issues. Rookie Killian Tilly, I think his name, or Xavier Tillman. We have Tilly, and I get those two mixed up all the time, but he's playing pretty awful right now. He had 3 back-to-back turnovers in the third quarter. And the Pelicans are just due at any point in time for massive games to go off, and we saw that tonight. So Memphis has a lot of questions to answer, but in reality they don't, because now they have some sort of standard this season that they're playing above where they should. So we'll see if they can, get some good wins and maybe continue to have these bad losses. They just beat the Sacramento Kings a couple nights ago. So you never know what you're going to get out of them. And tonight it was just horrible.
Yeah, Spence, I put the Pelicans in one of those categories like the Nets and some of these other teams, the Warriors. It's like one night you'll get an outstanding performance and then they'll disappoint you the next night. I mean, are you seeing this as well in the NBA from night to night? It's so hard to even not only just bet on it, but to have an expectation for any team because there's not a lot of consistency.
Yeah, I have a very short list of teams that I actually bet, and I hate the Pelicans more than anybody. I actually stay away from them now because I had picked them a couple nights ago. They were -4.5 favorites over the Pistons, and they got blown out by them. And of course, they blew out Memphis tonight. I was actually interested in the Pelicans tonight just because of how bad Memphis has been playing. There are some teams you just have to not bet on straight up. I think that's what it comes down to. The Pelicans would be one of them. I love anytime the Brooklyn Nets are down one of their stars, it's the easiest bet in the world. They'll always be close games because two of the stars we playing, and they get blown out. So today my ticket got ruined because the T-Wolves came out that D'Angelo Russell was going to be out for an extended period of time. After I had bet on them, I didn't know he wasn't on the injury report this morning. So that killed me. They lost their point spread by a point for me tonight. And then I had the Suns, and I think the Suns were blowing out the Brooklyn Nets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Spence, what I'm seeing here, we're coming up on the end of the third quarter. This is the back end of the primetime game on TNT tonight. The Suns, who are 17-9 on the season, Spence, they've kind of rolled out the consistency. They're playing pretty well so far this year. They do have a nice lead on the Nets here, 100-88. They have a better record than the Nets this year, leading the way. Devin Booker, 22 points, 6 assists. And we'll get into some Nets talk here as well tonight, as we're going to be pretty much heavy basketball and NBA tonight, as we're right in the heart of the season. A little bit of a shortened season, 72 games this year. Spent a few other good games tonight. Another team that's not really been that consistent. They're only 16-12 on the year, the Milwaukee Bucks. They lose by double digits tonight, 124-113 to the Raptors, who are trying to hover around 500. Fred VanVleet, who's had a nice year for Toronto this far, he had 33 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. Toronto gets the win. Milwaukee's another one of those teams. I don't know that you could trust them, and I don't know that they're scaring anybody come playoff time with a 16-12 record so far this year, and we're almost at the halfway point.
I'm a huge proponent of selling out for championships. Even if it doesn't work out, I will support those teams even in the worst years because not a lot of teams get that opportunity. But you should never, ever sell out for Drew Holiday. Is he a terrible point guard? Of course not. Has he been consistent? Is he awesome defensively? Yes. But for the assets they gave up for him, absolutely not worth it. I said that from day one, and it's showing true now. I think he was out tonight, so I guess my point isn't completely proven, especially if they lose by double digits. But they shouldn't be losing by double digits even without him to a Toronto Raptors team that has been lackluster at best this entire season. I have no idea what to make of Toronto, although they are gaining a lot of consistency. They have obviously a top 5 head coach in the NBA, Nick Nurse. So if they can make it happen, it's going to. Miami is another team that's kind of making a resurgence, although I really just don't believe in them, period. They lost to a Clippers team with 4 starters out. I think they were on like a 4-game winning streak, but I'd much rather put my faith in the Toronto Raptors right now than I would in the Miami Heat, if that says anything.
Yeah, it says a lot to me, Spence. But Toronto may be one of those teams that could start playing better towards the middle of the year and still find their way in the playoffs and scare some teams late. I mean, they have that championship pedigree. Nick Nurse, coach of the year and former coach of the year, and has a lot of respect. And these guys know what it's like to win. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see them play their best basketball towards the end of the year. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you would think that would be at Miami, but I think they just put a target on their back like this entire season. They shouldn't have been in the finals last year. Everyone knows that. They weren't the most talented team for sure. Jimmy Butler says for everyone to look out because they're going to be even better this year. When you say stuff like that, I mean, everybody's going to hate you. In a condensed schedule, I think you're not playing that many teams from the West either. So you're just going down the gauntlet of teams that absolutely are circling the date on their calendar for you. They have no defensive presence like they should. And, Tyler Hero is, I think, playing above his means at sometimes too. I know he's had some few games here, but they need more out of Jimmy Butler than Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero should be the complement piece to him.
Spence, you mentioned the Timberwolves on your ticket earlier. They fall to 7-21 on the season, one of the worst teams in the league. The Lakers, without Anthony Davis, continue to find a way to win. LeBron has 30 and 13 tonight. 112-104, the Lakers get the win. We'll get into some Lakers discussion a little bit later as we talk about what life will look like without Anthony Davis long term. But as of tonight, the Lakers continue to put another victory on the board. The Portland Trailblazers, Spence. The Portland Trailblazers tonight, quietly, in my opinion, 17-10 on the year. When you tell me that's their record, I'm surprised. They didn't get off to the quickest start this year, but they're 7 games above 500. Damian Lillard goes for 31, 10, and 7. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think CJ McCollum is still out of the lineup with an injury. Another win for Portland tonight, though.
Yeah, my MVP pick that I put in before the season started.
Yes.
It's still alive. It's still alive. He actually started off like terrible, and I was like, oh, okay, it's dead. But now that CJ McCollum's out, he's obviously had to step up quite a bit. So if they can get up to like the top 3 seed or something like that, I think my Damian Lillard MVP pick is definitely not looking too horrible right now. I got some crazy odds on it, so it was really worth it in the end. Unfortunately, my Isaac Okoro Rookie of the Year is completely dead, so at least I have one long-term bet still alive. No, but it depends with them. If they come up against someone who's great defensively, they get smashed. They're a terrible defensive team, especially when you have Enes Kanter there at the center position. I mean, it's just he's great for offensive rebounding. He's good in the post, but still defensively he just gets absolutely manhandled, which is why that 76ers win was just absolutely shocking. So I have no idea. I actually like betting them quite a bit. They're one of my favorite teams to bet, along with like the Lakers are one of them. Short lines to me are actually probably my main indicator for betting right now, because a lot of them are just very peculiar. I'll give you a sneak peek of a ticket that I won yesterday. Okay. I mean, just so you can get into some of my philosophy and a little betting tips for, I guess, people who are interested. But I had the Bulls +5 over the Pacers, and I had the Wizards -1 over the Rockets. Betting against the Rockets right now, by the way, is like the easiest thing you can ever do. They're without like 4 of their starters, and they have nobody out there right now. So I have no idea how. I know the Wizards are bad, but they certainly aren't that bad. So that was a great one. And the Pacers can just lose on any given night. And I actually like the Bulls. I think they're playing a little desperate right now. So I stay away from the ones that are like 9-10, because it's kind of too hard to read them. And there's too much fluctuation. Unless you want to buy points, you can do that as well. But that's kind of my thought process on betting so far in the NBA season. I'm winning at like a 40% rate on my NBA tickets.
And Spence, you talked about last night a little bit. I'm looking through the scoreboard of last night's game, Spence, and tonight. The scoring is just kind of through the roof this year in the NBA. I mean, talk about that a little bit. Do you think there's anything specific that's making these NBA games just so high scoring? Wizards win 131-119 over the Rockets last night. The Knicks 123-112 over the Hawks. I mean, the scoring is through the roof this year.
Yeah, well, this is a multifaceted thing. So, and it really kind of goes by team basis, because the Knicks have actually held teams under 100 points quite consistently this season, in my opinion. So they're getting it done on some level. But if you want to talk about the Hawks, they have invested nothing in the defense this season. They are the team that should have went after Isaac Okoro and nobody else in this year's draft. Instead, what do? They sign Gallinari, and they get another kid who cannot play defense in the draft. It makes no sense to me. That's what's going to happen to you. Clint Capella was the most important trade or sign, I forget how they got him, that this team has had in the past decade outside of Trae Young. But if you keep ignoring the position, you don't sign anybody who can play defense, this is what's going to happen. We see this also with the Brooklyn Nets, who I don't think have given up less than 120 points since the James Harden trade. And you can also talk about this in a greater scope of like basketball. I was sitting with my buddy. We were watching old Memphis Grizzlies highlights, old Carmelo Anthony highlights for the Knicks. Basketball has lost some of the pizzazz with the game. Basketball just isn't nearly as exciting now. You can't play defense anymore. I mean, I think that gets overstated just a little bit, but obviously it's a little easier for a guy to go to the free throw line 10 to 12 times than it was even just 5 years ago. I think Adam Silver hasn't ruined the game of basketball, but he's getting darn near close to it. He has no control over what's going on. David Stern would have never allowed the James Harden trade to go through. That much is positive. So I would say the majority of the blame goes on coaches. Second, probably Adam Silver, the way he wants the league to be run. And then third, you can say just the game has changed and the people are shooting more 3-pointers, and 3 points. 3 points is worth more than 2. That's the last point.
Well, no, Spence, this is interesting. And maybe talk about this a little more, because you said you were in a conversation, and the game of basketball, maybe, or NBA basketball, has lost some of its pizzazz a little bit. But you'll have conversations, and I think you may agree that the NBA is as talented now as it's ever been, with the superstars and the players. So talk about that dichotomy between a game that's as talent-ridden as it is now, but still lost something. I mean, how do you explain that?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting conversation. It goes back to like how you like what you think is good basketball.
Okay.
I'll go back and I'll watch a game from like the 90s. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's the most exciting basketball I've ever seen. Like hitting the low post. I grew up with Zach Randolph and Marcus Gasol. So obviously I like a little bit of post game, but the just feeding into the post, like maybe 10 3-pointers a game, it's boring. It can be. And then you have the other extreme of like this year where there is no post play essentially at all. I mean, the post play essentially ended with Zach Randolph. You could say LaMarcus Aldridge even has completely altered his game. He no longer plays in the post. So it comes down to the philosophies. And I mean, a lot of it starts, and I don't think anybody talks about this nearly enough in AAU basketball when these kids are 10. We have gotten to the point where we are watching these kids like from when they're 13 and up. You want to talk about like Charles Barkley's age? They didn't start playing basketball seriously until they were in high school. I think it's caused a lot of severe injuries for kids these days too when they get into the league. That's why you're seeing more torn ACLs. And I don't have the statistics or the data. I don't think there's even been a study on this, but I think that's why you see more torn ACLs in all of sports, like across all of them, because we put so much pressure on these kids. And as a kid, when you look up today, playing in the post, playing like really good defense isn't going to get you noticed by scouts. The crazy dribbling moves, the scoring 30 points a game, the shooting from half courts, that's what's going to give you a chance to get on a better AAU team, which could hopefully get you scouted and get you to a better high school. So it's weird to say that I think like basketball is being ruined when kids are 13, but that's just my honest opinion on it.
Spence, you make a good point. I'd love to continue this conversation with Tyler Brown if we get him on, because you make some really good points there, and I'll even continue on that. When I'm watching some high school mixtapes or I'm watching high school basketball and you watch these talented guys, the actual game of basketball sometimes gets lost. It's so much one-on-one. You know, the ball movement is almost not existent. You talked about the post game that's almost no longer there. And it's interesting, and I'm interested to hear people's philosophy between, talent and fundamentals and what could possibly win out. And for a while, Greg Popovich and the Spurs were winning out on that conversation when they were kind of dominating the league and seemed to be the only team playing like a pure style of basketball. But we certainly see it throughout the game on every level, high school to the pros, where you could turn on any game and you don't see a lot of fundamental basketball. The ball movement is almost non-existent. It's kind of a one-on-one game, like a run and gun type game. And that goes into the scoring, but that goes into also the difference in, and like you said, turning on a game years ago and then turning on a game now. I mean, do you kind of agree with that, Spence, that, I mean, the actual art of the game, the X's and O's, the psychology gets kind of lost nowadays as you turn on any game on any level and you kind of see guys just pretty much it's a one-on-one type game?
Yeah. Gosh, I want to say like that basketball in its core, like passing the ball, because we see Golden State, they were the ones who really changed like the entire NBA, like the way we play. I think there's been a little bit of a resurgence since then where everyone's like, okay, the center position is dead. And then you go, to last season where the center position was by far the most important position in basketball. Bam Adebayo. I've talked about this before, Anthony Davis and all of them. Jokic were like the three centerpieces of the playoffs last year. I think a major problem with just from a fundamental level too is we expect kids to play year round now. That is a major issue in baseball and basketball, whatever you want to call it. Children who have not made it to high school yet should not be playing basketball year round, nor should they be traveling every single day of their lives. We need to give some kids a little bit of normalcy because we're setting up unrealistic expectations for them. We're wearing down their bodies. If kids can just have like a 6-month schedule where it's not about like the sponsorships and the Instagram, the sponsored Instagram stuff, there's no regulations on this stuff. And I think that's a massive issue. Again, it's about the glamorization of the game, I think, is what's become the issue of it, where you it's all about how many views your highlight clips and stuff have. And, you can go a very long way. So I'll just go back and again, I'm thinking about like old basketball, just the way like people interacted with each other too at the games and how exciting the Garden was. And maybe that comes with, some of the more popular franchises being good again, too. Like when Carmelo Anthony, Tyson Chandler, J.R. Smith, Pablo Prigioni, like the Steve Novak days. I mean, there was a buzz going every single night, and the Charlotte Bobcats and stuff were the worst team where nobody still cared about that. But then you still had the small market teams like Memphis who made just enough buzz to keep people interested. And I think also there's players are much more willing, to go to different teams now. That's also a huge issue. LeBron James, I guess, started the wave here, and there's been a much more top-heavy, distribution of talent, where like 2 superstars are on like any playoff team. That's the only way to get it done. The Nuggets are probably one of the only examples of that being differently, where it's homegrown. For the most part, teams that have won championships are like bioengineered. The Warriors, I guess you could say, I mean, they essentially got lucky. And then for the one championship because of injuries. And then when you have Kevin Durant, that's obviously an orchestrated team. We've seen the highest end of this now with the Brooklyn Nets, where, they just have completely gutted their team. Houston now is going to be horrible. The Wizards are now just awful. And, there are other teams that are like in the conversation, like the Pacers with Paul George were never going to win a championship, but you could hear arguments at some point on how they had a chance to. You could hear an argument of how the Grizzlies could make it, to the conference finals, which they did at some point. The Thunder were also good. So the 1 through 8 has a possibility of going to the conference finals. Now it's 1, 2, or 3. 4 if you're extremely lucky, and most of the times almost never. I don't think it's fun to see 1, 2, 3 every single year, because that means because we can all predict in the preseason, who are the best teams in the league going to be? These 3 teams, they are. Okay, who's going to beat them in the playoffs? Nobody. All right, they're going to go there barring injuries. So the predictability, I think, is also, lost a little bit of what we used to love about basketball. And yeah, that's just my general thoughts.
No, Spence, you make a good point, and it's interesting because sometimes it's hard to really quantify that or analyze that when you have such star power in the NBA. But when you really look at it, it's at times it does have that lost luster. But I think come playoff time, the star recognition and some of the matchups, especially that we could possibly see this year, with the 2 LA teams in the Western Conference and then Brooklyn in the Eastern Conference, could really, it's always exciting come later in the year. So, and look, LeBron James is building a type of legacy here that, is in the conversation like we've been having with Tom Brady. So it's something that is generational happening right now with the Lakers and with LeBron James's career. And it's something as a sports fan you want to kind of cherish. And speaking of LeBron James, some of the conversation came up around some of the sports shows today, Spence. And now that we kind of mentioned it, with LeBron James, I'm kind of curious your opinion. It talked about during the possible NBA lockout of 2011, LeBron James talked about having an opportunity to play for the Dallas Cowboys and go to training camp there, and what that transition would have been like for LeBron James as an NFL player. And there was some differing opinions, but we've seen guys that are former basketball players make the transition to the NFL, and they weren't the caliber of basketball player LeBron James was. I'm convinced without any question, if LeBron James would have played NFL football and stayed healthy, he would be a superstar immediately without question. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, it's just when you say that, one of the most cliche things that makes you sound like you're woke or like you're a perfect sports analyst is to say that Antonio Gates and Jimmy Graham used to play basketball before they went to the NFL. Anytime those two are put on the screen, that's the first thing that's said. But I think it depends on the position. Like, he couldn't have played quarterback probably. But if he played the tight end position, could he have been more successful than Jimmy Graham if he played with Drew Brees? Of course he could. I mean, he had the same size of him. He's more athletic. He's probably a lot stronger. I mean, he's just built differently. The way his frame is. Could he have played receiver? No, he probably wouldn't have been as successful as a slot receiver. He's one of those guys, but he definitely would have been one of those new age tight ends, like what you see now. I wouldn't see him as a blocking tight end. I don't think he would have gone to the NFL to be a blocking tight end. He may have been at certain packages or at the very least just played like receiver type positions. Like I can't think of his name now, but the tight end for the Giants, who from Ole Miss, he basically is just another receiver playing that position. Yeah, Evan Ingram, where you're just a complete mismatch for linebackers who would have no chance to guard LeBron.
Yeah, I believe LeBron was an all-state receiver in high school, and I think he could have played receiver, tight end, either one. LeBron's so athletic, so fast, and I think he would have been a problem for anybody. It wouldn't matter what position he played. I think he would have been super successful, whether it was tight end, receiver, defense. I think it would have all just came down to how healthy he was. At Spencer the Wiz, follow him on Twitter, at Spencer the Wiz. I'm Brad Restituto, at Brad the Believer. The Rest Stop comes to you every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time, talking a little NBA action right now. And Spence, some of the games last night were quite interesting, and I want to talk about a game probably not too exciting on people's radar, but a team, the Knicks, who just acquired Derrick Rose in a trade. They're hovering around 500 and a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, and Julius Randle just continued his monster season last night with 44 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. I've been high on Julius Randle for a long time since the Lakers drafted him. I liked him ahead of Brandon Ingram. It's debatable who you would rather have, but Julius Randle is the clear go-to guy on this Knicks team. They get a nice win last night. Spence, what do the Knicks need under Tom Thibodeau to maybe make a step forward again and be a team that can maybe win a playoff series?
Well, to talk about Julius Randle for a second, I mean, this is the first real coach that Julius Randle has had. If you want to go down the coaching carousel, even going back to the Lakers when they were just awful, but even you talk about recently for the Knicks, Dave Fizdale to me is like the worst NBA coach in the past decade. I'm a Grizzlies fan, so I guess I'm a little salty about that. This is a guy who started Vince Carter on Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs, like in that last year that Memphis had gone. So he's just on another wavelength. I think he's playing with the defensive coach. Yeah. So sorry. Did you want to bring in the guest? I'm sorry. I couldn't.
Yeah, no, go ahead with your thoughts, Spence. Go ahead.
Yeah, but Julius Randle he's going to be an all-star this year. He's obviously playing better than Samantas Sabonis. And just recently he's the thing that holds them all together. Actually, just lost Mitchell Robinson. They have gotten a little lucky with matchups in terms of injuries and just playing bad teams, but still, he goes out on the court every day and he plays really hard. And he plays hard for Tom Thibodeau. The only thing I worry about is Tom Thibodeau's minutes. Julius Randle does not get a lot of rest, but we know that about Tom Thibodeau. That's been his coaching philosophy for a very long time. RJ Barrett has been getting a few, but they can't really afford to play without him. But I think, if you want to look at the Brooklyn Nets, they're like the most valuable franchise in the NBA. People obviously want to play for the Knicks, but they haven't had a reason up until now. The Brooklyn Nets were just okay for a couple seasons, and now they've orchestrated one of the craziest teams of all time on paper. So I think if the Knicks can just get okay and get back to the playoffs, then they can start having serious conversations about having stars on their team.
Yeah, you're right. We're talking NBA basketball. That's Spencer the Wiz. I'm Brad Restituto. Joining the show, the Rest Stop, a good friend of mine who I appreciate jumping in, former basketball player at Humboldt State, D1 basketball coach at Cal Poly, Cal State Monterey Bay, Cal State Fullerton, Tyler Brown, TV. Thanks for jumping in on the Rest Stop and joining us here.
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
All right, man. We're talking a little NBA right now, so I'm going to have you jump right in the conversation. I want you to kind of piggyback something we talked about a couple minutes ago, if you can. Spencer and I were talking about, I believe, and correct me if you disagree, the NBA talent-wise is in a better position than it's been in many years. But as me and Spencer were talking about, sometimes the kind of pizzazz of the game gets lost sometimes. And we were talking about the scoring in the NBA is so high right now in this year. And maybe some of that has to do with the style of play. We don't see a lot of post-up basketball, the fundamental basketball in today's game from the high school level up. We don't see a lot of. We see a lot of one-on-one basketball. You could turn on your local mixtape of your best high school player. And the basketball game, the way it's played itself, is a little bit different. What are your thoughts on the dichotomy between the talent and the way the game is played this day and age?
Honestly, the game is it's evolving. You see people, take a look at Kevin Durant. He's a 7-foot guard, and the things that he does is just remarkable. So the game is just changing. Like, these kids are developing these skills at such young ages, and they're growing them. But they've changed it. You've seen how prolific the 3-ball now is all over. Kids are learning to shoot threes before they're learning to shoot layups. So it's just a sign of the times. a lot of things that we throw around in the coaching world is positionless basketball. You just want to get your 5 best players out on the court, and it doesn't really matter what that looks like. A lot of people, 2 bigs. You don't see teams doing things like that, and a lot of these times, where you find your matchups and your mismatches are in that 4-man position. Look at guys like Draymond Green and kind of what you would call like a hybrid or a stretch 4. And that's what makes the game special, I think, right now. But getting all these guys to just be able to do different things and their skill sets and really being able to utilize them is huge. And so that's kind of what you're seeing right now. It's just a part of the evolution. People are becoming more skilled. These kids are like freak athletes at a young age. The things that these kids do on these tapes, it's like, what do you guys eat? Like, it's crazy. So all that plays a difference. They're way more athletic. They're bigger. They're faster. They're stronger. And again, like their skill set is different. Like Damian Lillard shoots step back threes from the logo like it's nothing. I mean, if you saw his last couple of plays tonight in that game, when they were up, then they were trailing and came back. Dude, the game is different. And so how do you become the next step of unguardable? Like, these dudes just take a step back. Like, okay, if you're going to guard me here at this line, like, I'm just going to shoot it from a foot back, and it just keeps on evolving. And obviously not everyone can do that, but I think it's just the nature of the beast. It's kind of where things are going. So it's exciting. It does kind of get away from what we would say is like the tough defense, but when you play so many games in such a short span, they don't really have the time to lock in. And that's what makes the playoffs so special, when you have to beat somebody in a 7-game series and, you really have time to game plan. And you see those scores are a lot less than they are in the regular season because it's so quick. You're on to the next, getting these guys healthy in the turnaround. So I think, all that stuff plays a role in it, where the game is going. But I think the game is in good hands. There's a lot of young talent. I haven't been able to watch much of the G League stuff that's going on, but just seeing some of the highlights and some of the scores, it's a lot of young talent. And, getting those guys on the Ignite team, these prolific high school players, I mean, these kids are like 18, 19 years old, and they're out there doing it. So the game is in good hands. It's definitely going to be, changing and constantly growing and developing. But that's just the nature of the beast. And as with all games, I mean, I think that happens a lot in football too. You look at how the quarterback positions change with like Patrick Mahomes and some of these dudes being able to move. And I don't know why my man from Baltimore is slipping my mind right now, but
Lamar Jackson.
There you go, in Louisville. And so you look at like how the game is changing for those guys, and then you look at a guy like Tom Brady, who's just, the quote unquote, like the model type quarterback, and he goes out and he gets it done. I mean, he's a stud too, but I imagine obviously, he's had to adjust his game a little bit with the sign of the times, but they make sure that they give him a hell of an offensive line so he can do his deal, and they give him some weapons and he'll get it done. But it's just where we're at. Like, everything kind of, it changes a little bit. I mean, the rules change, can't be as physical. Same thing in football, and now you got to adjust. And so I think all of this is just like, it's part of it. Yeah.
Well, Tyler Brown joining us on the rest stop and talking NBA basketball and basketball in general and where we're at right now. And let's continue the conversation in the NBA. Look, the Lakers are the defending champions, winning the NBA title in the bubble in Orlando, and then the shortest turnaround ever in NBA history. And I got to be honest, Tyler, I'm surprised at the quick start that the Lakers have got off to. I thought that they would have a hangover from the shortened off season, and you've got a lot of young guys that are first-time championship winners with the Lakers. But aside from opening night, they've really proved me wrong, and they've got off to an amazing start this year, 22-7 on the year. They get another win tonight. LeBron James he's playing every single night, putting the team on his back, doing it without Anthony Davis. It's so impressive. It's so historic. It's something I don't think we'll see ever again. And I was telling Spencer that this is like Tom Brady conversation. We're seeing something in LeBron James that is so generational that we'll probably never see again in our lifetimes, the type of things that he's doing and continuing to do. But as far as the Lakers go, is this something they can sustain without Anthony Davis? Are they going to be able to repeat if Anthony Davis isn't at full strength this year?
repeat, I don't know. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a major part of their success, and everyone does know that. They still got the best player on the court right now. I mean, I think Kevin Durant is the best player in the game, but I think that's just like putting everything that he has together. But LeBron James is the best player, like overall. Like Kevin Durant has the best skill set and everything, and then LeBron James, he's executing everything. And so obviously, whenever you have that man on your team, you always have a chance to win. Period. I think they were able to have the start that they had is because they never had a finish to their last season. Like they were still in championship mode. So you gotta get these guys and they get hungry and they start to see it and everyone wants to put that quote unquote asterisk. Like them dudes had something to prove, in my opinion. So it wasn't very hard for them to keep it going because they never really had time to let it all sink in and like enjoy the moment as you get with some of these guys. And like, you know, they didn't get a parade. They didn't really get an off season. They really just went to rehab and then got right back to it. So for me, in my opinion, their mind never really turned off from that championship mode. Like they're still in bubble mode, which is why they're so dangerous now. And then once you get a taste of winning and you see what it's like, you're hungry for more. Like they'll repeat and wanting to do it and just understanding that road is going to be harder. But now you start looking at the West and like, you know, these teams like looking at like the Jazz and so a lot of these teams are like they're starting to find their groove and these teams are going to be dangerous if they don't have AD in there and that's what's going to be tough. And then obviously you look at the Eastern Conference and the Sixers are playing very well. The Nets record doesn't show it, but I mean, look who's in the locker room. So, you know, it's a lot of things going on. But I mean, you think about teams like the Suns, like you get Chris Paul. It's freaking like we talk a lot about LeBron James and what he's doing at his age, but let's not forget about that man. Like the point guard, like he's doing it. You know what I mean? And now he's got some weapons around him. He's got that DeAndre Ayton, and then he's got Devin Booker, who is a prolific scorer. Like he's got some pieces. They're a dangerous team as well. And he did so much with quote unquote a lack of a roster, you know, with the Thunder, and look what he was able to do. And just it's not like he doesn't want to get a ring before this is all said and done. So the work is definitely cut out for them, regardless. Without Anthony Davis, I think that margin becomes very slim. But I would still, more times than not, I'm putting my money on LeBron James to get him to the dance. You know what I mean?
That's right. Tyler Brown joining us, former D1 basketball coach at Cal State Monterey Bay, Cal Poly, St. Louis Obispo, Cal State Fullerton. TB, you mentioned a little bit the Jazz. I want to talk about them for a minute because they're quite the story this year as they won again last night in what was a fantastic game. They beat the Philadelphia 76ers 134-123. As far as covering the spread here in Vegas, that's, I believe, 18 out of 19. And Spencer the Wiz, jump in on this conversation too, because I want to get all three of our opinions on the Utah Jazz. Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench, 40 points, looks like to be the clear front runner for sixth man of the year. And the Jazz are just clicking on all cylinders with Donovan Mitchell and a team that we really kind of questioned a little bit their chemistry because they were the team that sparked this whole COVID-19 thing with the game with Gobert and then Donovan Mitchell. But they are not missing a beat right now. They're 23-5 on the year. They've, I believe, won 18 out of 19, something like that.
8 in a row, eight in a row.
Yeah, they're just playing fantastic basketball. And we talk about teams that maybe trying to get healthy. If the Jazz stay healthy, can they sustain this? Can they sustain what they're doing now? And can they be a real threat to represent the Western Conference in the finals? TB, I want to have you start off on the Jazz conversation, but Spence, I want you to jump in also and talk about the Jazz. I mean, we've talked about them a little bit further, but they are playing outstanding right now. And this is a little bit of a shortened season. So it's not like, we're going to be coming up on the middle of the year here in just a few games. Is this something they can sustain all the way to the finals?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, I think they got the tools. Honestly, if you really think about it, all this kind of really unfolded as soon as Shaq kind of called out Donovan Mitchell and said, I wanted to see a little bit more out of him, and I don't think he's quite there yet. And I feel like ever since we saw that little excerpt on social media, dude, they've been rolling. And he is kind of like really like, he was like, okay, like, all right. And 18 out of 19. Like, them dudes, they've gotten it going. So it's definitely, they're dangerous. Like, they have tools, they have weapons. They got a defensive center that can move. They got a prolific scorer in Donovan Mitchell. They got playmakers. They got shooters. I mean, they got a 6-man. It's all about depth when you get into the playoffs and who can produce for you down the line. You know what I mean? So they're as real as it gets. I don't think it's a fluke by any means. That's where we're at in terms of the roster, and just like, scrolling through it and looking at it. And Mike Conley is a proven point guard. Derek Favors, Joe Ingles he's a dude. I mean, you got guys, so I don't see why not. The only thing that people are going to really question is, how do they do in a 7-game series against the Lakers? Can they get really past those? Do they have enough weapons? And right now, it's not necessarily who you got, but who's playing the best at the right time. Like, it's all about timing. Same thing with March Madness. Like, look at the Miami Heat. None of us thought they were going to be there, but they're gritty. They got it done. They were playing good basketball at the right time. They believed in each other. So, I mean, you get teams like that and that I've seen winning, like, they're dangerous as all get out.
Spence, jump in here. I mean, the Utah Jazz, they're playing out of their minds right now. Is this something that can be sustained all the way to the finals? I mean, even though they're not going to have a full capacity of fans when the playoff starts, a lot of people say there's something to be said about playing in that altitude. They're fantastic at home. They're fantastic anywhere right now. Is this something that, Spence, you think they can sustain? And if Anthony Davis isn't fully healthy the entire year, can the Jazz be the team like the Raptors were a couple years ago, the Nuggets who represented the Western Conference in the finals? Could Jazz be the next team that takes that step?
Yeah, you talked about it, when Shaq kind of called him out. Essentially, he was trying to get a little spark underneath him. I think he does believe he can be that guy, but he wanted to hear him say it. But my generation, because he's my age, we're just different. We're not really like kind of confrontational. So it was kind of awkward for him to get that kind of question. He's more of like, I'm in my own lane. I kind of do my own thing. But everything is working out for them. Jordan Clarkson, obviously, is having the best year of his career by far. He's very comfortable in their system. But it's all pieced together by Mike Conley. We all very much forget about last year in the middle of the year. We were talking about bringing Mike Conley off the bench. He was playing that badly, shooting darn near 39% field goal percentage. And this year, his percentages are way up. He's injured right now, unfortunately. But he was the guy who had brought the Grizzlies to the conference finals. Zach Randolph and Marcus Gasol were very important, but they do not get anywhere near without him. Not only because of his play on the court, but because of the leadership that he brings. They didn't have – Donovan Mitchell is not a leader. He's a very much like, I lead on the court. But every team, in order to reach the finals, needs a guy in the locker room who's going to change things. We know LeBron James is that. We know Jimmy Butler can do that. But Donovan Mitchell is – maybe he can develop into it, although I would very much say that it's something that very early on. So I'm going to say no for the time being. So when Mike Conley does decide to hang it up, he's only 32, so he's getting a little bit up there, but he's probably still has 2 more years left with the Utah Jazz. But when he does end up leaving, someone else is going to have to take his place. Otherwise, they're going to go back into obscurity. The Jazz have just never really been able to get it done historically. I mean, we know about the John Stockton teams, but other than that, they haven't really ever gotten close to winning a championship. So it's a lot to ask of a team to go from mediocrity to just, being average to going all the way to the NBA finals. I mean, you can kind of say the Miami Heat, being that nobody of those players, played with LeBron James, but still Jimmy Butler is like to that level of guy. Other than that,
he's super gritty, and their culture, and everyone talks about the Heat organization, and so you definitely don't get that like aura with the Jazz, but and I agree. You don't just like, boom, now we're gonna rock and be champions. And again, you've got to go up against a LeBron James Western Conference. That's not easy for anybody. But playing well at the right time. But like he said, I agree. Are they going to be able to lock in, and who can they really beat in a 7-game series? But having that point guard is a big deal. Locker room leadership on and off the floor, point guard presence. You think about a lot of these championship teams. They all got point guards, and at the end of the day, we know LeBron James is a point guard. Like, regardless of what position he plays, he is a point guard, and he definitely does. And you saw it with the Lakers, with Rondo and LeBron. Like, some of the stuff that they were doing in the finals was crazy, to have both of those basketball minds on the court and dissecting, the other team and really getting guys in spots to make the game so easy for them to be successful. So, yeah, Mike Conley is a big deal, and you're definitely going to need him. And he's one of the guys that definitely gets looked over as a top point guard in not only the league or the Western Conference, but in the league. So I agree with that. But work is cut out for him. But I just don't count them out with how well they are playing. But they're gonna. We'll see how they bounce back when some things start to fault a little bit for them.
Guys, I want to get your opinions on, in a losing effort last night against the Jazz, the Sixers, Ben Simmons, who we haven't talked about too much this year. The Sixers are 18-10 on the year under first-year head coach Doc Rivers. Ben Simmons had a career-high 42 points last night. Does this mean anything to you guys? Tyler started off with Ben Simmons. A fantastic effort in a loss, 42 points. Unlike Ben Simmons, we know he doesn't shoot the ball from the outside very much, but if this guy could ever develop an outside shot, he'd be in the conversation for a top 5 player in the league. Fantastic performance in a losing effort, but Ben Simmons can carry the scoring load, it looks like, as he did last night, scoring 42 points. Does that mean anything to you, what he did last night?
Not too much to me. I mean, I guess it's nice to see and that he's capable. I think he's a hell of a player as well. To be a prolific scorer in the league and not shoot the 3 ball, I just don't think there's very many of them. Think about a guy like DeMar DeRozan. I don't know who else we can name off the top of my head, honestly, especially at the guard spot. It doesn't necessarily mean too much to me. I mean, it's the NBA. Most of these guys are capable. Let's be realistic. And, in his presser, he was like, I was offended that they put Rudy Gobert on me. But realistically, if you're looking at in a losing effort, like if he couldn't beat them, you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to let this dude go for 50 and take the W, that's what we're doing. That's the game plan. He can't beat me.
Yeah, he's not going to score 40 points again. The big missing piece about all this is Joel Embiid did not play in that game. I see it very much. It's not in the same vein. So when I say this, it's going to sound a little weird. But when Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire played together, fundamentally those two opposed each other. People think of Carmelo as like an outside in, but in the prime of his career, he played from the post and then worked his way outside to the mid-range and then the 3-point line if he was feeling it that night. So obviously, he's not going to shoot threes as of right now. If he's an okay post player, and especially when you have very undersized guards, which is like the most popular thing in the world because post game is dead, and certainly anybody in the guard position can't play in the post either. But he's kind of against the mold there. If he's matched up against smaller guys, I mean, he could have a field day at any point in time. But Joel Embiid, we know, is an awful 3-point shooter, someone who should never shoot threes even if he wanted to. I think he's like
I don't agree that he's an awful 3-point shooter.
I think he's like a 20% 3-point shooter. I'm going to look it up right now. But
it's probably not the best statistically, but I think he is a work in progress. I think that's part of something that he's elevating his game, similar to how guys like Blake Griffin did. Except when Blake Griffin elevated his, he just started hitting them. So it was like, dang, like I was on the scene. But again, that's just the nature of the beast. Like all these bigs are shooting the ball. I mean, look at the Lopez brothers, and then like everybody can step out. And they're trying to show the range. I mean, we saw Dwight shoot threes a number of times last year.
Dwight.
That's yeah. And he has no business doing it. So, but that's where we're at because, to an extent, it's like what teams are going to live with. And so they have to force that guy to guard them. And the only way to get that guy to guard you is to take the shot, miss or make. You know what I mean? So you have to prove it.
I mean, it's ruining the Milwaukee Bucks right now. Like Giannis Antetokounmpo is forcing himself to shoot threes, and it is just decimating their team this season for whatever reason. I don't know. So I think if you can't shoot threes, don't do it until you know you can shoot. Because Joel Embiid shooting a career low in 3-point percentage, and he's career high in 3-point percentage, but a career low in attempts. The season he tried to shoot the most, he shot 30% from downtown. If you can't do it, you can't do it. That's kind of my point.
Yeah, and I'm not agreeing, especially as it's one of those things. I saw Kelvin Sampson say something in a press conference about college. He's like, if you're a bad 3-point shooter, I'm not going to try to make you feel better about shooting. I don't want you shooting the ball. It's not good for you. It's not good for our team. Like, we're not going to win. But I mean, I feel like in the league, it's so much different because these guys spend all this time in the off season working on their game. and then just the egos and everything else that goes into it. And, the game's changing now. I have to be like, oh, I adapt and I can do this. And I'm sure they very well can. But at the same time, you got to make the shot. And you have and it's the same thing because you don't have to guard Giannis outside of the paint. And if you can get him from keep him from going downhill, then you nullify him. I mean, he's still going to be very he's going to affect the game with his length, his athleticism, and he's just overall activity. But I mean, if I can help off of him and he gets that double team, and like you're just going to wear him down, and you're not going to beat somebody with all twos. Like it's not. You got to be able to have some. You got to be able to knock in a three ball.
Guys, I want to get a couple more topics in, but I got to get your opinion real quick, TB. We talk about shooting the three ball, and Spence, you as well. They've been telling us, the NBA media pundits have been telling us for years, Ben Simmons needs to work on his shot. He can't shoot. He's got the form. He should be able to shoot. We're like 4 or 5 years in, and he's still not shooting the three ball. So it looks to me like it's never going to happen. He's just not going to be a shooter. He's never going to shoot the ball. I mean, if it hasn't happened at all, where in 3 years he has not taken 3-point attempts, what makes us believe it's going to happen ever? So what about this conversation about you can teach guys to shoot the ball? Apparently you can't. Your thoughts?
Well, in my opinion, he just needs to have a game. It doesn't matter if he's an all-encompassing scorer. I think that's overinflated. Now, it looks horrible when you see someone like DeMar DeRozan and the game's kind of past him, but he's still an effective basketball player. But I think the more important issue with the 76ers just in general, or a lot of the teams, is that for Ben Simmons, basketball is not the most important thing in his life. If you want to talk about all the greats, LeBron James in the game right now, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, basketball is their number one priority. Whether or not they mask it behind social justice and stuff like that is another question. We know at the end of the day, there's nothing above that. And that's what makes them so great. Ben Simmons, he does care about basketball, but it's not the number one thing for him. And that's why they lost the series when Kawhi Leonard played them in Toronto, because especially with Kyle Lowry too, they need a guy on their team that isn't just good, but someone who their number one top priority is going to be winning a championship.
Look, guys, I want to get into this conversation. Tyler, I want your opinion here. You mentioned the name Blake Griffin a couple minutes ago. He's a guy that I still think has a little bit left in the tank, and someone that can help a team maybe get over the hump. Do you think he's got enough left to help a team get over the hump? And where do you think he might land, or the best spot for him to maybe help a team reach the finals? Blake Griffin, where do you see him fitting in the best as he's looking for a new team possibly, and the Pistons looking to trade him?
Honestly, I have no idea where he lands. But does he have it? For sure. Like, I'm not saying he's out. I think that his years in Detroit have been really good, just displaying his overall versatility. Like, we used to think that Blake Griffin, well, I don't say we, but majority of people used to think Blake Griffin could only catch a lob, like legit, like only could catch a lob, and his post game was very suspect at best, back to the basket. And now he's shooting threes, he's handling it off the ball. Like, dude is a player. I mean, he's always been a player if you watch him in college and in high school, but he's really sharpened up those skills, and he's a serious threat at multiple levels. It's not just, in the vicinity of the paint. So I definitely think he helps. I think he's a competitor. He's a proven veteran, former All-Star. Like, he's still got a lot left in him to that he could be valuable to a contender for sure. I don't think that's any question at all. Now, who gets him, where he goes, man, I feel like the list could be long, depending on injuries and a lot of other things. Like, I could see him going to play in Miami, but do I think Miami's going to go to the finals? No, but you know what I mean. I think that's somebody that he could help. I think he could help a team like the Raptors. And if you're looking in the Western Conference, like he can help teams. Like, that's not what I'm necessarily worried about. But where he's going to end up, I mean, who knows? Can he help the Trailblazers? Is he a better defender than Nurkic? Does he help Does he help their setup? Is he more mobile? Does he change their dynamic? Now they're a little bit faster getting up and down the court with, him, Carmelo, Dame, and CJ. Like, that could be kind of nasty. You know what I mean? So there's some teams that he can really help make better for sure.
Spence, real quick, go ahead.
He will be a Golden State Warrior. That's my prediction right now. I don't see him going to any other team. They have the least amount of talent in the league, and it's just I can just see the headlines now. I think he'll play a lot of time at the center position or mix and match Draymond Green. They play positionless basketball just in general, or he may even come off the bench for them. But they're desperate for anybody who knows how to play basketball on their team because they have easily one of the worst rosters in the NBA, like by far. I don't think he's been looking for a huge payday this season. Hope he's going to want to try to go to a playoff team and get his big contract.
Yeah, it takes him into retirement for sure.
Yeah,
TB, your thoughts. This is your neck of the woods, Golden State. Do they have the worst roster in the league? And will Blake Griffin help them?
And it's like they have young talent. Worst roster. I mean, they're not good. I mean, but Steph is amazing. But even it's just like I feel like they're building basketball IQ. Like those guys don't even know how to get Steph shots. Like it's crazy in my opinion. And then he has to be like overly aggressive, which is borderline out of character. But as fans, we love to see it because he's just such a prolific scorer and he just does so many amazing things. But they do. I agree. They do need some help, but they are plagued a little bit by some injury and youth. But it's a completely different beast, obviously, if you have a guy like Klay Thompson out there. But I don't think Kelly Oubre has been what they thought he was going to be for them. I mean, he's just kind of had some struggle. I think Andrew Wiggins has been more than they thought he was going to be, or maybe just the general public probably thought that he was going to be. I think he's been playing very solid. I like Pascal. Other than that, I mean, Damian Jones, they got a Bay Area kid and Juan. They got a couple guys that are just, you're rooting for them. But then it's not the Golden State we've seen in the past 5 years, which is what people have come accustomed to. So now that they're below that bar, then I think everyone's off the horse. But even with all that being said, they're still sitting at an 8 spot. And at the end of the day, like, no, they're not going to probably do any real damage in the playoffs, but they're going to extend a series a little bit longer than it needs to go. And you just, you know what I mean? You get them in there and they may take you to a game 6 because they got some veterans and some guys that could lock in. But I mean, out of the first round, no, sir.
TB, do you think I love Klay Thompson so much? Do you think he can come back from 2 straight injuries and be the guy that we've seen in the past and bring the Warriors just by himself with maybe an addition or 2 back in the conversation? Or is it just too high expectations to expect a guy to come back from 2 straight years off of injury and be the guy that we're accustomed to seeing?
Accustomed to shooting or seeing is like he's a knockdown shooter. I don't think he's going to lose that. That's not going anywhere. Is he going to be able to defend at the level that he was before? It's going to take some time, of course, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere because so much of that is like going to be mentally his heart, his pride, and the will to want to defend. As you know, a lot of guys don't have interest in it. I think he does. So it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment for sure, but I don't think that we should be writing Klay Thompson off. I think he is a very talented player, and I think he will be able to fit in because, again, like, you could put a shooter in any situation. You know what I mean? He's still going to spread the floor. You're still going to respect him. I mean, the dude goes off for 60-something points with minimal dribbles. Like it doesn't take him much to get back in the groove. It's just having, like you talk about, like the right people around him. Obviously, having somebody like Steph on the court is like there's 2 attention getters with that, and you have a playmaker in Draymond Green, and you get a guy, the young fellow that they got as he's figuring it out, he's only going to get better. I mean, so it's not like they're going to be, just frowned upon moving forward. But the thing is, it's just that while they're in a stalemate, other people are getting better. And so that's the tough part. The Western Conference is evolving around them. So they're going to be playing catch up in that sense. So it's how deep can they get their roster in a year and a half in order to, when he's coming back, they are in that conversation. Because as long as the Lakers have LeBron and AD, and as you see, LeBron has no interest in slowing things down. So that's going to be, you know, the pinnacle at the top, and then again you're going to look around the West. The Houston Rockets, I feel like, are very dangerous if they can figure it out. I mean, I like their setup. So you got them, you got the Suns. Dallas seems to be imploding a little bit, but again, they'll figure it out because Luka's a hell of a player to build around. The Blazers are just dangerous, period. Damian Lillard should be in the MVP conversation a lot more. He's by far, I think, one of the most clutch players in the league. And he's got it. He's a leader. He's a player. He's everything, in my opinion. So, you know, they've got their work cut out for them. As before, they've been the person always being chased. They're going to have to do some chasing. So that's like the tough part. And so it's like, where can we get the cap space, and can we get the guys available to come play and now make them, you know, more of a contender?
TB, man, I appreciate you taking some time to jump on the show. There's gonna be all kinds of NBA talk as we wrap up closer down the road. I'd love to have you back on, man. Stay safe out there. Look forward to catching up with you soon, man, especially once we get through all this COVID stuff.
Yeah, appreciate it. Gonna need to take a trip out to Vegas for sure.
All right, brother. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. That's Tyler Brown, former coach at Cal State Monterey Bay, Cal State Fullerton, joining us on the Rest Stop. He's got some great insight into basketball, the game itself, and we look forward to having him on the show again down the road closer to playoff time. Look, we just went the full hour on just NBA talk. There's so much more to talk about with TB also when it comes to basketball. I mean, I'd love to pick his brain about what's going on in his neck of the woods in California with everything going on, how the NBA is navigating the COVID situation. So we'll definitely have him back on down the road to talk more about this stuff. But that's it for tonight's show on Tuesday. I want to thank Tyler Brown. Follow him on Twitter at Tyler, at Coach TB1, Spencer the Wiz, at Spencer the Wiz, on Brad the Believer. Make sure you check out the show and the podcast version of the show every Tuesday and Thursday, but you can check out the podcast anytime. If you miss us live, just check out iTunes, Spotify, Google, Audio Boom under Landry Football Conference Call, and the Rest Stop will be underneath there. For Spencer the Wiz, for Tyler Brown, I'm Brad Restituto. Have a great night. We'll see you back on Thursday.